George Foreman, the heavyweight champ, larger than life in every way, passed away today at the age of 76.
Fighting out of Livermore, California.
George Foreman, the legendary heavyweight boxing champion and larger-than-life figure, has passed away at the age of 76. Known for his powerful presence both in and out of the ring, Foreman died in Livermore, California, weighing 226 pounds at the time of his passing. The announcement came earlier today through a statement posted on Foreman's official Instagram account by his family. Foreman's journey captivated millions, rising from the tough streets of Houston's Fifth Ward to become an Olympic gold medalist, two-time heavyweight champion, ordained minister, and later, one of America's most successful entrepreneurs and product pitchmen. His infectious smile and unwavering positivity made him a beloved icon far beyond the boxing world. But in a deeply emotional and candid interview that has stunned fans around the globe, Foreman's wife, Mary Joan Martelli, has broken her silence. At 61, Mary sat down for what would become her most revealing and heartbreaking conversation about her late husband's final years. The two had been married for 35 years, with Mary playing a key role in supporting Foreman's career revival and business success in his later life. Though she appeared composed at first, the weight of her grief was evident as she opened up. "People think they knew George," she began, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "They saw the boxer, the preacher, the man with the grill. But in those final months, we were living a very different reality. It's time people knew what really happened." What she revealed next sharply contradicted the public's perception of Foreman's health. According to Mary, her husband did not pass away peacefully as earlier reports suggested. Instead, he endured a long, private battle with a degenerative condition directly tied to his boxing career, one the family had kept secret at Foreman's request. "George made me promise not to tell anyone until the time was right," Mary said. "He didn't want his final chapter to be filled with pity or attention. But carrying this secret has been its own kind of burden. I believe he'd understand why I'm speaking now." Roughly 3 years before his death, Foreman began showing signs that something was wrong: minor memory lapses, uncharacteristic mood swings, and brief moments of confusion. Given his age, the symptoms initially didn't raise major alarms. But as they worsened, medical specialists eventually diagnosed him with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a progressive neurodegenerative disease caused by repeated blows to the head. Doctors explained that all those punches, especially from his early career, had left lasting damage, Mary recalled. It was especially cruel because George had been so careful in his later years, watching what he ate, staying active, keeping his mind busy. But this wasn't something he could fight with willpower or healthy living. This was damage done long ago, finally catching up with him. What made this revelation even more jarring was how successfully Foreman had hidden his illness. Unlike many aging fighters, he maintained a sharp wit, articulate speech, and apparent vitality. He became a rare symbol of post-boxing success, physically strong, mentally sharp, and spiritually grounded. But behind the scenes, it was all carefully orchestrated. "George became a master at concealing his symptoms," Mary said. "He'd rehearse for public appearances, memorize everything, and we'd plan interviews around his good days. If he had a bad day, we'd cancel, blaming a scheduling issue. People thought he was just being his charming self when he'd lose his train of thought, but really, he was struggling to remember." Perhaps the most heartbreaking moments came in private, when Foreman's mental clarity would vanish without warning. His mood grew unpredictable, periods of sadness and confusion punctuated by uncharacteristic anger. On especially difficult days, he didn't even recognize Mary. "There were times he looked right at me and asked, 'Who are you?' she said, her composure finally breaking. The first time, I thought he was joking. But the look in his eyes, it was like my George was gone, even though he was still sitting there." Other days, he was fully aware of his condition, something Mary admitted was sometimes harder to bear. "When he was lucid, he knew exactly what was happening to him," she said. That made it all the more painful. Physically, Foreman's decline became just as apparent. His once mighty hands developed tremors, which he would hide during public appearances by keeping them in his pockets or clutching objects for support. The strength that once brought down legends like Joe Frazier gradually faded, and daily tasks became difficult. But according to Mary, it wasn't the physical decline that hurt George the most, it was the loss of his mental clarity. George built his life through sheer force of will, she reflected. He reinvented himself over and over again, from a troubled kid to Olympic champion, from a feared slugger to a gentle preacher, from a retired fighter to a beloved businessman. His mind was always his greatest weapon. Watching it slip away was the one fight he couldn't win. Mary Foreman, George Foreman's devoted wife of 35 years, spoke at length about the spiritual journey that marked her husband's final years, a journey that tested and ultimately deepened the faith that had become central to his identity since his famous religious conversion in 1977. "Love you guys because you're really standing with the Lord Jesus, I love that," George once said to his fans, a sentiment that echoed through his life and ministry. But during his final battle, Mary recalls, that faith was both challenged and renewed in ways few could imagine. There were nights, she admits, when George would question why a loving God would allow him to suffer in this way after decades of preaching, serving, and helping others. Yet even those moments of spiritual doubt gave way to periods of deep, almost transcendent peace. "He told me once, maybe this is my final sermon," Mary says quietly. "Not one I'm preaching with words, but with how I face this ending." In his clearer moments, George came to see his suffering as a kind of sacred testimony, a final lesson in endurance and grace. "Everyone faces something they can't punch their way out of eventually," he told her. "This is mine." What hurt Mary most was watching the man who had defined himself by independence slowly become reliant on others. The once indestructible heavyweight champion now needed help with even the simplest of daily tasks. Behind closed doors, their home was gradually transformed to meet his changing needs. A small, trusted team of family members and caregivers worked quietly to maintain the illusion of normalcy to the outside world. "We became experts at managing appearances," Mary admits. "If you saw George during those final 2 years, it was always on a good day, days we carefully planned and supported behind the scenes. Every photo, interview, and public appearance was orchestrated to preserve the image the world expected, the strong, smiling George Foreman." Some days, she says, maintaining that illusion took immense effort. This veil of secrecy extended even to parts of Foreman's large family. With 12 biological children and several adopted ones, George was a devoted father, his 5 sons famously all named George. But according to Mary, only the children still living at home and a few of their adult children were fully aware of the severity of his condition. The rest knew he had health challenges but were unaware of the full diagnosis. George was adamant about controlling who knew, she explains. "I don't want pity, and I don't want to be remembered this way," he'd say. He wasn't being vain, he was thinking about his legacy. He believed his story had helped people, and he didn't want that legacy clouded by his final illness. Despite the family's financial stability, thanks in large part to George's wildly successful endorsement of the George Foreman grill, which earned him more than $200 million, the cost of care was immense. But what mattered most to George wasn't his own treatment. Mary revealed that he quietly directed a significant portion of his fortune toward launching a foundation to assist former boxers suffering from neurodegenerative conditions like his, many of whom lacked the resources for proper care. He kept saying, "I'm the lucky one," Mary remembers. He had access to top doctors, the best care, and he was surrounded by family. Most fighters don't have that. They end up broken alone. He was determined to change that reality for others. It became his final mission. Perhaps the most startling detail Mary shared was the real timeline of George's health decline. While the public believed his struggles were brief, the truth was far more painful. His battle had stretched over 7 years. Subtle signs, moments of confusion, mood shifts, or uncharacteristic irritability had emerged long before a definitive diagnosis. Looking back, there were earlier signs, she says. But George was so strong, so sharp, it was easy to dismiss them. By the time we couldn't ignore them anymore, we were already in the middle of a losing battle. That meant many of Foreman's later public appearances and business endeavors occurred while he was actively experiencing symptoms. The effort to maintain his image during this period was enormous. Mary described it as a covert operation supported by family and trusted associates. We had signals and code words to help him during appearances, she says with a faint smile. His kids were incredible, stepping in seamlessly when he struggled, finishing his thoughts, redirecting conversations. It all seemed so natural, like a close family interacting. Most people never noticed. The decision to go public with the truth was not made lightly. Mary spent months in quiet consultation with family members before deciding that sharing their story might help others. George always used his struggles to inspire people, she says. His childhood poverty, career setbacks, business failures, he talked about them all. He believed in overcoming. I think in time, he'd want this final battle to serve that same purpose. Mary hopes their story will increase awareness of CTE and other neurodegenerative diseases affecting not just boxers but football players and other athletes as well. She has since become an advocate for enhanced safety in contact sports and expanded support services for those suffering from cognitive decline. Boxing gave George everything, she reflects. It lifted him out of poverty, gave him a platform, and made him a success. He loved the sport until the end. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't acknowledge the cost. He would want us to protect future fighters. The good of the athletes always came first for George. As the interview draws to a close, Mary offers one final, bittersweet reflection on her husband's final days, one that captures the dignity, love, and quiet strength that defined their life together, even in its most difficult moments. Certainly. Here's the restructured and rephrased version of your content, divided into coherent, emotionally resonant, and informative paragraphs. I've organized it into two main sections. As George Foreman's body and mind gradually failed him, what remained untouched was the core of who he truly was, his kindness, his deep faith, and his unwavering concern for others. Even in moments of severe decline, there were flashes of clarity when George was unmistakably himself. Mary Foreman recalls that during those lucid intervals, his primary focus was not on his suffering, but on ensuring those around him were okay. That's who he really was, she says softly. Not the symptoms, not the decline. That's the man I want people to remember. For fans who had long admired George Foreman's extraordinary reinventions, from Olympic gold medalist to world champion, from preacher to successful entrepreneur, this revelation redefines the narrative of his later years. Yet, rather than diminishing his legacy, it adds a final layer of quiet courage. George once said that his greatest victory was not in the ring but in transforming himself from an angry young man into someone who could give back. His final years, lived with dignity in the face of decline, may well have been his most powerful testimony of all. While George Foreman's story speaks to personal resilience, a very different kind of disruption has been unfolding on the global stage, this one involving electric vehicles, innovation, and rising geopolitical tension. Chinese EV giant BYD recently captured headlines with a technological leap, the unveiling of a flying car known simply as the EV. The company presented it not as science fiction, but as a near-future reality, an elegant vehicle that combines vertical takeoff capabilities with sleek road functionality, aimed at transforming urban mobility. The flying EV's design is both aerodynamic and eco-conscious, powered by advanced electric propulsion and crafted to ease congestion in crowded cities. Imagine gliding over gridlocked highways and landing seamlessly near your office or home. That's the vision BYD CEO Wang Chuanfu has championed. While regulatory and safety challenges still stand in the way, BYD insists that their vehicle meets stringent US and European standards. Safety is our number one priority, a spokesperson noted, emphasizing the robust battery systems and design standards integrated into the EV. But just as BYD's flying car began capturing global imagination, its ambitions hit an unexpected wall. In a stunning move, the US government announced a ban on BYD vehicles from American roads, a decision that shocked the industry and blindsided the company's leadership. What prompted such a drastic measure? The motives remain murky. Was it a response to safety concerns, a manifestation of deepening geopolitical tensions, or a strategic protectionist move? Regardless, the impact is severe. For BYD, which has aggressively expanded into global markets with affordable, eco-friendly EVs, the US ban marks a major setback, especially for the much-anticipated EV flying car. Consumers now face fewer choices in the green vehicle market, and industry watchers fear that the ban could slow the momentum of EV adoption in the US. Beyond consumer impact, the decision carries broader implications for international trade. As relations between Washington and Beijing grow more strained, companies like BYD are increasingly caught in the crossfire. The ripple effects are significant. International partners may now think twice about working with a firm embroiled in US regulatory disputes. Meanwhile, BYD's reputation, carefully built over years of innovation and expansion, may face renewed scrutiny. For a company that had positioned itself as a leader in next-generation mobility, especially with its pioneering flying vehicle, the ban is not just a commercial blow, it's a symbolic one. Still, BYD is unlikely to back down. Known for pushing boundaries, the company remains committed to shaping the future of transportation, whether on the road or in the skies. The sky is the limit might sound like a slogan, but for BYD, it's still a mission, even if that mission now has a few more obstacles to clear. As BYD navigates this unexpected and potentially damaging turn of events, its leadership is now under intense pressure. The company must find a way to overcome this significant challenge without losing momentum in its drive to innovate. The road ahead may be uncertain and filled with obstacles, but BYD's commitment to sustainability, technological advancement, and the future of electric transportation remains resolute. Conscious buyers, who increasingly value environmentally responsible solutions, will be watching closely to see how the company responds. The recent US ban on BYD vehicles has ignited a heated debate. Was the decision based on legitimate safety concerns, or was it politically motivated? On the surface, safety seems like a justifiable reason. After all, any government has the duty to ensure that vehicles on its roads and in its skies meet strict safety standards. However, as tensions between the United States and China continue to escalate, many industry experts and analysts suspect that the ban may be more political than technical. Critics argue that BYD, being a high-profile Chinese manufacturer, has become entangled in the larger geopolitical struggle between two global superpowers. Some see the ban as a strategic maneuver aimed at curbing the influence of foreign companies in the US automotive market, regardless of product quality or safety compliance. This situation creates a difficult dilemma. While public safety must always be the top priority, there's growing concern that politically motivated restrictions could deprive American consumers of access to cutting-edge, eco-friendly technology. At the center of BYD's innovation pipeline is the EV, a flying car designed to radically transform urban mobility. Envision a future where traffic jams are a thing of the past, where vehicles lift off vertically and glide over congested streets. BYD is working to make that dream a reality. The EV combines sustainable electric propulsion with advanced vertical takeoff and landing (VTOL) capabilities. With a sleek, futuristic design, it's tailored for urban environments where space is at a premium. The aircraft is engineered to carry 5 passengers, using articulated propulsion units that allow it to lift off like a helicopter, then transition to winged flight like an airplane. This unique blend of technologies promises not just a faster commute but also a significant reduction in carbon emissions, something urgently needed in a world facing escalating climate concerns. For city dwellers, the ability to bypass traffic entirely could redefine daily travel and reshape how cities are designed. Despite its groundbreaking potential, the EV faces significant hurdles, especially when it comes to regulatory approval. Introducing a flying vehicle into the American market is no small feat. The US has stringent regulations governing both road vehicles and aircraft, and the EV straddles both categories. On one hand, it must comply with automotive safety standards. On the other, it must meet even more rigorous aviation requirements, including structural integrity, flight control systems, and noise mitigation. For example, the EV features lightweight carbon fiber propellers and color-coded navigation lighting, green on one side, red on the other, standard in aviation but novel in the consumer vehicle world. Navigating these dual regulatory pathways can take months or even years, as agencies carefully evaluate every detail of the design and performance. Companies like BYD must also contend with public perception, addressing concerns about noise, safety, and the social acceptability of low-altitude aerial vehicles flying over urban centers. the US ban has cast a long shadow over BYD's broader global ambitions. The company had set its sights on worldwide expansion, with the EV flying car as its flagship innovation. Entering markets across Europe, Asia, and beyond was key to BYD's growth strategy. However, the decision by the United States, a market with immense influence over global automotive standards, has caused international partners to reconsider. The US not only represents a massive consumer base but also sets trends that often influence regulatory approaches in other countries. Now, with this regulatory setback, BYD may find it harder to secure partnerships, attract investors, or convince foreign governments to approve its flying car technology. Hesitation is likely to ripple through boardrooms across continents, especially if BYD becomes seen as a casualty of broader US-China tensions. In the face of these challenges, BYD's next moves will be crucial.